Husman is a business graduate and also a certified trainer from the IHK, which is the business chamber, commerce chamber here, and also master coach. She's also certified Innermetrics consultant and an Innermetrics master coach. After vocational stations in sales and marketing in the food retail, trade and consumer goods industry, she has supported clients as a coach and trainer for more than 70 years now. Her major subjects are professional freedom, potential analysis, career support, communication, assertiveness, self, and stress management. So now we can also go over to the workshop.
Yes, the aim of gender equality is also a large aim of myself, because I was always engaged in women organizations that try to empower women to be successful. And that's also one of my aims in my trainings and coaching, to encourage young women, elderly women, all women to be more of themselves and not to try to fit into male roles and try to be males in their business, but to be themselves and to be successful just the way they are. And that's also one of my major topics. It's the freedom, the professional freedom, because I experienced in my own professional life that the rules were always made by men. And my first boss, he always told me, you must jump on the table, you must be loud, you must be like me at the best. But I was never such a person who was very loud. I was always clear, but I wasn't loud. And I was never jumping on tables to tell something. I had another way to tell things. And it took me really many years to find my own manner to do things and to use my own potential. And that's what we are talking about today. And after this hour, I would be really glad if I had encouraged you to use your own potential and not to try to fit in any roles given, but to demand for changes, to demand to be yourself. That's what I would like to encourage you to do. So I'll show you my first chart. So the title for today's workshop is Be Successful with Your Individual Potential. And if we look, just a second. So if we look at the current situation, we see that a study which was made in Germany in 2019 says that 45% of all employees, men and women, feel rather under-challenged and have the impression that they cannot use their entire potential. So nearly half of all employees, they're not really content with the situation they face in their job. And I think that's a really, really large number. And at the same time, illness-related absences caused by stress are increasing. So on the one side, people feel under-challenged. On the other side, stress is increasing. And that's strange, I think, because when people are under-challenged, we could have the impression they could just have more stress and be more challenged. But the challenges that people face, they're not always those challenges that make people happy, but just any challenges they may be not like or may be not good at. Most people nowadays, they still believe that success is increasing by effort, by overtime work, by little private time, and being hard to oneself and others. Others believe that success mostly relies on the talents that people have. What do you think? What do you think makes people successful? I would like you to discuss a couple of minutes in little groups in the breakout rooms and just note down, what do you think? What makes people successful? What are the main points that make people successful nowadays? So Anna, you may send.
Invitation should be there, so everyone.
Okay, so you stay there for a large study, which was effectuated by Jay Niblick in the United States in 2009, and he tried to find out what successful people all have in common. And in spite of the fact that most people think it's mostly effort and talent which makes success, in his study, he found out it's something else. And he studied successful people over 7 years, and there were 197,000 participants in 23 countries. And he tried to find out, what do all these successful people have in common? And do you think they have more talent than the other ones? How much more talent they might have? What do you think did he find out? Anna, could you just start the poll that we prepared? So you can just click a number. What do you guess is the percentage of talent that those successful people have more than others?
So there is the link in the chat now. Just please click it and make a guess.
I think the voting needs to be opened.
Is that working now?
Yes, it's working now.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. So we have got 0%, 10%, 20%. Thank you very much. Oh, it changes. 33 to say 20. We'll wait for a couple of seconds. 10%. 20. So the majority says 20. Thank you very much. I think we can close now. Thank you. So the majority says 20. Some say 33, 10, one says 0. And in fact, he found out, Jay Niblick found out in his studies that successful people do have 0 more talent than any of us. So it's not really the talent that makes people successful, because successful people seem to have average talent, like any of us. I'll show you what he found out. He found out two things. He found out that successful people, they had a really great self-awareness. That means people who are successful, they know themselves very well. They know exactly what they are good at, and they know exactly what they are not good at. And the second point is authenticity. So they do not only know what they are good or not good at, but they have a really good ability to do a lot of what they are good at and do little of what they are not good at. So they don't really have more talent, but they use the things they're good at. And they do not use the things they're not good at. Our whole life, we were taught that people are born with natural strengths and weaknesses. We were always told, that's your strength, that's your weakness. But that's not really the case. We are not born with natural strengths and weaknesses. We are born with natural talents and non-talents. We create our strengths and weaknesses ourselves. If we depend on our non-talents, that's a weakness. If we depend on our talents, that's the strength. So the most important thing to do is to get to know oneself, and in the second step, use your natural talents. And try to not depend on those stuff that you're not good at and that you don't like. So if you do a job which demands a lot of your non-talents, and you can't really use a lot of what makes you happy and what you are really good at, you will have stress and you won't be very content in your job. I'll show you something else. This is the difference between a person and a role. A person who steps in a certain job, he accepts that role. If you, after your business studies, for example, you start your first job, you accept that role and you try to learn that role. You try to learn that job. And then after a while, you identify maybe a couple of own deficits. We all have things that we're not really good at. At the beginning, you may not know, but after a while, you see that's the things that I'm good at and that's the things I'm not so good at. And what do you think most people do when they have identified these deficits? Do they go left or do they go right? Do they change themselves to fit in the role, or do they change the role? What do you think? You can write in the chat if you like. Person or role, what do they change? In most cases. Person changes in most cases. I think people will try to change themselves. Person in most cases. I go back to the chart. You are absolutely right. Most people, they adapt themselves So they try to fit in that role which they had accepted. And few people, they turn left and they try to adapt the role to herself. So for most people, the role is untouchable. The role that we start after the studies, after university is untouchable, but the person is sacrificed. And that's the reason why many people, they feel quite stressed in their jobs, because they always try to change themselves to fit most perfectly in that role, and they do not really try to change a role, to have a role that fits to themselves, a role which would make them really high performant. This is not 100% like you switch a button and then the role is changed. That's not realistic. But still, you can do little steps and ask for changes. Ask for working conditions that fit to yourself. Ask for jobs that you would like to do, that you are interested in. So you can do little changes over time that makes the role fit a lot better to your personality. And I think that's really important, because most roles, they are created by men on the one hand, and also the working conditions, they are created by men. And in addition to that, the roles, they are fixed before the person comes to the company. So the role is not really fitted to a certain person, but to the job. And that makes people not very successful and not very high performant. But how can you reach this self-awareness? How can you get to know yourself a lot better? And how can you reach authenticity? It's very important to take your time for self-reflection, to think about what stresses yourself, what makes you happy, to think about what is easy for you in the job and what is difficult for you. You can also use diagnostic instruments that make personal properties measurable. When Busra introduced me at the beginning, she said I was Inemetrics consultant, and Inemetrics is such a diagnostic instrument that makes personal properties measurable. So it's not just a guess, it's really a measurable instrument. So you have something black on white about yourself. What are your favorable behaviors? What are your talents? What are your motivators? All this comes out of this instrument. And the second thing is to accept yourself and have the courage to live your individual personality with all its possibilities and limits, of course. And people, they are too scared to admit limits, but I think that's the wrong way. If we always try to make a perfect impression to fit to external expectations, it's not the way you will be performing the best. And you are only high performant if you are yourself. So you have to name your needs clearly. I have a friend, she just told me that in her company, they wanted to place her in a really large office with 12 other people working there. And for her, this is pure stress to work with so many people in one large room. So she said, no, that won't work with me. I will fall in a burnout after 3 weeks at least, because I can't stand all those talking and all, because I'm really sensible on my ears. And for me, this doesn't work. So you can either be silent and stay there and get a burnout after 3 weeks, or you can name your needs. This won't work for me. I won't be good working if I work with 12 people in one office. And you have to get involved. So you have to name what really interests you. You have to get engaged in topics that are really hard topics for you, that you really like and you're really interested in, even if they are not offered to yourself in the company. So you can ask for it. You can say, oh, that's really interesting. I really like to engage in that topic. And you have to influence your area of responsibility. So you have to make yourself heard and not be silent if something doesn't fit. And I will now show you the three components of capability, which can be measured in the inner metrics advanced insights profile. One thing that we measure in this profile is our preferable behavior. Some people, they behave in a really dominant, decisive way. Others, they are introvert, so they're more silent. Some people, they behave really detail-orientated, so they need facts, they need arguments. Others, they focus more on the emotional aspect of the situation. The second component is our motivation. Why are we motivated to do certain things? We'll have a look at the 7 basic motivators. And the third component are our talents. What are our natural talents? We'll have a look at them as well afterwards. So these are the 3 components that I just showed. And the thing is that here in the middle, where all 3 components, they lie on one another. And that's the point where we are top performance. That's the point where we are authentic. So where we are entirely ourselves. And the great thing about it is that in that point, we are top performer on the one hand, and content and relaxed on the other hand as well. So happiness and top performance can go together. The way is not to put more and more effort in the job. Effort is nothing bad, but still, the most important thing is not to work overtime and to work more and more and more and be really hard to yourself. That's not the way. The way is to do what you're good at, and that's in the middle, where you are motivated, where you are in your preferable behavior. And in that point, you are really top performer and relaxed at the same time. Isn't that great? And I really made the experience in my first years in companies where I was employed, which were really stressing. I had quite a good time because I really found my job interesting in my first years. But I was asked so many things to do which I wasn't really great at, which I wasn't really motivated in, that I tried to compensate these things by putting more effort in it. But that's not the thing. I should have asked for other doings and should have delegated some of the doings even in my beginning years. You can't control everything, but I should have talked a lot more about the things I would really have loved to do. So I start showing you the first component, the behavior. So there are 4 major behavior structures. The first one is decisive. So someone who's very decisive is deciding very quickly. So if you have a high score in this point, you decide very quickly. It's a quite dominant behavior. The second one describes how you interact with people. So someone who's very interactive, he gets in contact with other people very quickly, is quite charismatic, is quite, it's easy for that person to get in contact and to convince people about ideas and all that. And the stabilizing category shows people, if you have a high score there, you like to have a stable environment, stable conditions in your company, stable people around you. Everything should be quite stable. So if you have a low score, that means you love changes, you love that everything is always different. And the fourth one is cautious. It means if you have a high score, you like details, you like to control everything, you like to read sentences 10 times to be sure that it's all correct. So it's quite of loving perfection. So, and now we'll do a little self-reflection. So take a sheet of paper and look at the questions that you see here and think about what is right for yourself. Do you decide quickly and convincingly? Or do you prefer to take time to make a decision? Do you solve problems directly and decisively? Or do you prefer to think a lot about problems before deciding? So the more you are honest to yourself, the more these answers will help you to get a clue of your personality. So just write down your answers and afterwards count how many yeses you have in each section. So the more yeses you have, the higher your score in this section might be. I really advise you to do that now and not to just read it, but really answer it for yourself, because you get really it's really worth thinking about it. And a question you can answer to yourself after our workshop, because it will take too long now, is to think about it. What does it mean for my professional life if I have a high score in the red sector, or if I have a high score in the interactive sector, the stabilizing or the cautious? What's the consequence for me and my working path? So what we're doing right now is to do little self-reflection. And it's quite interesting to do that, because you get first knowledge about yourself and your preferable behavior. If you want to have exact scientific results, you can also do such a inner metrics profile to get really objective results. But it's a good first step to think about it yourself. But to get it more objectively, it's still worth doing such a scientific profile. And the second component that you will find out with that profile are your basic motivators, your values, what makes your heart laugh, what makes you really enthusiastic. That's the things, why are you getting up from bed in the morning? So there are 7 basic motivators, and the highest one we see here is the individualistic motivator. So if it motivates you to be free, if it motivates you to decide things by yourself, and if it motivates you not being micromanaged with many, many details that you have to do, but rather decide by yourself and go your own way, then you probably have a high individualistic motivation. If the economic aspect of jobs, for example, motivate you, then you may have a high economic motivation. It's not only the money which is behind that, it's also to earn money, but it's also to get clear results. It's the thing that form follows function. So for the economic motivated person, the function is very important. The results are very important. It doesn't need to be nice or make happy, but there must be a clear result. So that's this blue motivation. The green one is completely different, the first one. It's the aesthetic motivation. The aesthetic motivation is the motivation for human correlation, for something nice, for nice. If you look in my room behind, you will see some plants, you will see some decoration. And I always need an environment that is really nice to be comfortable with. And my aesthetic motivation is quite high. And it also includes the well-being with other people, the connection with other people, to be nice with other people, an harmonic environment is in there. And then, you have the political motivation, which is the motivation to influence, to have power, to decide, to bring things forward. So leading people, they often have a high political motivation, but you can also lead with lower political motivation, but you have to compensate that because it's not so easy. So for leading in a company, it's helpful to have a motivation to influence, to control. The yellow motivation is the altruistic motivation. That's the motivation to help others, to be good to other people, to be helpful, to do something good for others. And the gray one is the regulatory motivation. And the regulatory motivation is the motivation to have everything in a good structure, to have rules that are followed, all this. And the last one is the theoretical motivation. It's the motivation to understand things, to learn your whole life. So someone who has a real high theoretical motivation won't be very comfortable in a job which has a lot of routine, which is always the same all the year through. So that person would need a job where development is possible, where you can have time to learn and not only be forced to be pragmatic and just do. So there's one self-reflection that you can do afterwards. I will give you on your way. So think about, what are your two main motivators? They are most interesting. They're all interesting, but the most interesting are your two main motivators. What motivates you most? What makes you stand up in the morning and engage in certain topics? Just write down your two main motivators now. And after the workshop, when you go on your way afterwards, you can think, how much can I realize this motivator in my current situation? Is it perfect? Can I realize that one very strongly, or is it quite weak? For example, if you have a high individualistic motivation and you work in a company where you really get micromanaged, where your boss tells you every single step that you have to do, and he puts you really in a small cage where you can't really act as you would like to. So you will probably not be very content. And it's really worth thinking about these motivators and how they are fed in your current situation. And then you can think about, in the next step, what can I actually do to live more of my motivator? How can I possibly change my current job situation? How can I change the way I apply for jobs? Which jobs would be interesting with my motivation? It's really worth thinking about. And the last component I would like to show you are your talents. In this talent section, the tool measures how you solve problems, how you interact in your job, in the external and internal world. So if, for example, you have a lot of talents, we talked about it before, it's not the talents that make people successful. It's the talents that might be helpful, but if in your inner side you have no self-belief, you don't know where you want to go, and you don't know your role in your life, you won't be able to use your talents. So you need two factors. You have to have some talents. We all have certain talents. And on the other side, you have to have the self-belief to believe in yourself, that you can reach your goals with your given talents. You don't have to have perfect talents. You just have to have a great belief that you can use your talents and be successful with the talents that you have. I'm just in a coaching process with a client who has great external talents. He's very empathetic. He has good talents in strategic thinking, in structural thinking. He has really, really good external talents, but he hasn't got any internal talent at all. So he's nearly on the ground with the red bars because he has no self-belief. He doesn't know where he wants to go, and he doesn't know his role in his life. So he has like a Ferrari in front of his door, but he can't drive it. But because he doesn't know where to go, he doesn't know how to go there, he can't drive. So the main thing I would like to tell you at the end is not to be unhappy with everything which is given to you. Don't be unhappy with a missing talent here or a missing talent there. Just take what you have and make the best out of it. Because we all have such a large pool of talents. We all have motivators that help us to be performant. And we all have great behavior preferences. Whatever they are all good. The only thing is that we have to have a look what we are good at and what we are motivated at, what we love to do and what we are good at to do, and then try to find a job which fits to our own potential, or try to change the job that we have to be able to use more of our potential in our current job, which is often a lot easier than we think. If we accept that the role is not fixed, but the role can also be changed if we take some time, if we get engaged, and if we try to show up and not be silent. So be aware of yourself, be authentic, and then you will be successful in the future. Thank you very much for joining.
Thanks a lot, Tanya. That was extremely interesting.
Thank you. I wrote a book on that theme, which I hold here, which is in German. So some of you won't be able to read it, but some I talked to may be interested in reading it. It just came out, so it's really, really new. And it's a working book which you can use to go all through this self-reflections that we just started a tiny little bit today.
And it's very important to realize what are your own core competencies and what can we do to be happier, or how can we do to challenge this and to be more in this motivation part. So thank you for taking us through the very important concepts of motivation and how to establish and how to really flourish your potential. And in this sense, I would really thank also the audience for participating, and thank you all for being part of the session. And we would like to also see you in other sessions. And if you would like to, you can also be part of our LinkedIn group or also to our newsletter, etc. And we will also inform you. So thank you all for being here today, and I wish you a nice evening.
I thank you for joining too. It was a great pleasure for me to be with you. Thanks for your attention. I put my email address in the chat. So if you have any questions left,